soft glow of chandeliers bathed the five-star restaurant in golden light. Guests in tailored suits and glittering gowns filled the air with quiet laughter and clinking glasses. It was one of those evenings where appearances meant everything, and manners even more. At the center of it all sat Victoria Langston, a woman whose confidence was matched only by her privilege. Her husband, Richard, a well-known real estate tycoon, was across the room talking to investors. She barely noticed, and her eyes were fixed on the staff moving silently between tables. That's when she saw Amara. The young black woman carried herself with grace, her uniform crisp, her smile polite. But to Victoria, she was invisible, just another waitress serving champagne. When Amara accidentally brushed past her table, a drop of red wine splashed on Victoria's designer dress. The laughter around the room didn't stop, but Victoria's face burned with fury. She stood up, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" she snapped, pulling at the fabric as if to show her guests the stain. And before anyone could react, she tore it herself, right at the shoulder, the sound echoing across the hall. The room went silent. All eyes turned. Amara froze, humiliated, whispering an apology that never reached Victoria's ears. Victoria smirked, tossing the torn piece of fabric toward her. "Next time, try to stay in your place." But then, a deep, calm voice came from behind. "Victoria, what have you done?" She turned around, and her smile vanished. Standing there, eyes cold with disbelief, was her husband, his hand resting protectively on Amara's shoulder. And in that moment, Victoria realized the waitress wasn't who she thought she was. The air inside the restaurant thickened with tension. Conversations had died mid-sentence, and even the soft jazz from the corner band seemed to fade into an uneasy silence. Victoria's eyes darted between her husband and the woman she had just humiliated. "Richard," she stammered, forcing a laugh that didn't sound like her own. You can't be serious." "Her?" But Richard didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on Amara, whose trembling hands were still clutching the tray. Slowly, he took it from her, set it on a nearby table, and guided her toward a quieter corner. People began to whisper. The grand dining room, once a scene of elegance, now felt like a stage of judgment. Victoria's heart pounded. What's happening? Why is he defending her? Amara hadn't planned to be there that evening. She wasn't a waitress, not anymore. She was a woman of quiet strength and remarkable success, co-founder of a growing nonprofit that helped women of color find opportunities in business. The restaurant had been hosting a charity dinner that her organization supported, but the event planner, overwhelmed by last-minute chaos, had begged for help setting things up. Amara, always the calm in every storm, had stepped in to assist. Sleeves rolled up, no pretense, no ego. It was in that moment of service, simple and genuine, that Victoria had seen her, assumed, and acted. Victoria Langston came from old money, generations of wealth and entitlement. She was used to being adored, envied, obeyed. Her beauty opened doors, and her husband's fortune kept them open. But behind the diamonds and designer gowns, she lived with one consuming fear, being outshined. Her husband, Richard, however, was different. Once a man who shared her hunger for status, he had changed over the years. He had grown distant from the shallow world of social circles and fundraisers. While Victoria obsessed over appearances, Richard sought substance, people with vision, compassion, authenticity, and that was what drew him to Amara. Months earlier, Richard had attended a business conference focused on diversity and economic reform. Amara had been one of the speakers, poised, eloquent, and magnetic in her conviction. She spoke about rebuilding systems that failed marginalized communities, about giving power back to those who had been silenced. Her words had stirred something in him. After the event, they had stayed in touch, discussing philanthropy projects, community investments, and eventually, friendship. Victoria knew none of this. As Richard escorted Amara toward a private lounge, Victoria followed, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. "You can't just walk away from me like that," she hissed, her voice trembling between anger and confusion. Inside the lounge, Amara tried to excuse herself. "It's fine, Richard. Really, it's not worth—" He cut her off gently. "No, it is worth it." His tone was calm, but beneath it was something simmering, disappointment, perhaps even shame. Victoria folded her arms. So now you're defending her over your own wife? Richard turned, finally meeting her eyes. I'm defending decency, something you seem to have forgotten. Those words stung deeper than any public embarrassment could. Amara didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply stood there, composed, graceful, yet carrying the invisible weight of a lifetime of being misjudged. For her, this moment wasn't new. It was just another scene in a long history of assumptions. But this time, she wasn't going to walk away quietly. I've seen this before, she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Women like you don't see us, not until you realize we belong in the same room. Victoria scoffed, but her confidence was slipping. Her husband's silence was louder than any rebuke. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters covering the charity event had noticed the commotion. Within minutes, whispers about the incident began circulating among the elite crowd. Victoria's perfect image, the one she guarded so carefully with her chart, was starting to crack. And she had no idea that this single act of arrogance would soon spiral into a public scandal. One that would threaten everything she claimed to stand for, because Amara wasn't just any woman, and Richard wasn't just any husband. The night was far from over. The following morning, Victoria Langston woke to the sound of her phone vibrating endlessly. Dozens of missed calls, messages, and notifications flashed across the screen. Headlines, social media posts, and tagged photos. Society wife humiliates black charity guest. Racist incident shocks elite fundraiser. Millionaire's wife faces backlash after public outburst. The videos were everywhere. Shaky clips from guests' phones showing the moment she tore her own dress, the way she spoke to Amara, the look on her husband's face. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the comments. Disgusting. This is why privilege blinds people. That woman should be ashamed. Victoria slammed the phone on the bed and buried her face in her hands. How did this happen? She whispered. They twisted everything, but deep down, she knew they hadn't. Richard hadn't spoken to her since the night before. He had slept in his office, leaving her alone in their marble-floored mansion, surrounded by silence and guilt. By noon, her PR team arrived, panicked but professional. Victoria, this is bad, her publicist said, flipping through news clippings. You've become the symbol of everything wrong with high society. We need immediate damage control. An apology video, a charity donation, something. Victoria clenched her jaw. An apology? For what? That woman embarrassed me. I was wearing a $10,000 gown. The publicist sighed. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about a dress. It's about how you treated her. The optics are terrible. She wasn't even a waitress. She was one of the charity's founders. The words hit Victoria like a punch. What did you just say? She's Amara Hill, Harvard graduate, CEO of the Empower Foundation, and one of the youngest black philanthropists in the country. Victoria's stomach dropped. You're lying. But she wasn't. Across town, Amara sat in a quiet cafe, ignoring the buzzing of her phone. Her organization's inbox was flooded with interview requests, sympathy messages, and offers from major networks wanting her side of the story, but she refused to engage. She didn't want revenge. She wanted change. Her assistant, Layla, placed a coffee in front of her. You're trending everywhere, Amara. People are furious for you. Amara sighed. That's not what I want. If they're going to be angry, let it be for the right reasons. Not just for me. For what this moment represents. She looked out the window. Because women like her, they don't just humiliate one of us. They humiliate generations who fought to be seen. Meanwhile, Richard sat in his office, staring blankly at the city skyline. He'd spent years building his reputation, but one night, one cruel moment had made him question everything about the world he lived in. His phone buzzed, a message from Amara. Don't blame her, Richard. People like Victoria are raised to believe they're better, until life shows them otherwise. Let her see for herself. He exhaled slowly. The truth was, part of him felt responsible. He had created this lifestyle, the luxury, the social circles, the superficial values that allowed people like Victoria to thrive in ignorance. But he also knew something Victoria didn't. Their marriage had been crumbling for years, and this public scandal was only the final crack. 2 days later, Victoria received a hand-delivered envelope. No name on the front, just a gold-embossed card inside. You are cordially invited to the Empower Foundation's annual Women of Change Gala, hosted by Amara Hill. Her first instinct was rage. How dare she invite me? But as she reread the card, something inside her twisted. Guilt, curiosity, fear. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, eyes tired, pride fading. Maybe this was her chance to prove she wasn't what they said she was. Or maybe she just wanted to see the woman who'd unknowingly destroyed her world. The venue shimmered under soft golden lights, the same elegance as before, but with a completely different soul. The guests were diverse, women of all colors, ages, and backgrounds, laughing together, celebrating empowerment rather than privilege. When Victoria arrived, whispers followed her like shadows. Cameras flashed. Some smiled politely, others turned away. She forced herself to stand tall. At the center stage, Amara appeared, poised, radiant, and confident. She wore a deep emerald dress, her natural curls framing her face like a crown. The applause was thunderous. Victoria felt a strange mixture of admiration and envy. She doesn't even have to try, she thought. People just respect her. Amara's speech began, and every word struck deep. For too long, many of us have been told to know our place. But today, we redefine what that means. Our place is wherever we choose to stand, whether it's behind the counter, at the head of a boardroom, or on a stage like this. The audience cheered. Victoria's throat tightened. Because true power isn't about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself, and how you treat those around you. As Amara spoke, their eyes met across the room. It wasn't anger Amara showed. It was something worse. Pity. Victoria looked away, blinking back tears. By the time the gala ended, the narrative had changed. News outlets praised Amara's grace and dignity, while Victoria's name remained synonymous with arrogance. Her sponsors withdrew from her fashion brand collaborations. Social clubs revoked her memberships. Her friends stopped returning calls. Even Richard had moved out temporarily, seeking space and perspective. One evening, sitting alone in her mansion, Victoria turned on the TV and saw Amara being interviewed. "Do you forgive her?" the host asked. Amara paused, her gaze calm. "Forgiveness isn't the question. Understanding is." Racism isn't always about hatred. Sometimes it's about blindness, and the only cure for blindness is awareness. Those words cut deeper than any insult. For the first time, Victoria felt something unfamiliar. Shame. Not because she had been caught, but because she finally saw herself through someone else's eyes. Weeks passed. Victoria withdrew from public life. The noise faded, but the silence inside her grew heavier. One afternoon, she drove without destination and ended up in a small neighborhood community center, the kind of place she'd never have entered before. Inside, children played. Volunteers handed out meals. And in the corner, she saw Amara. Their eyes met again. This time no crowd, no cameras, just two women standing in a quiet room filled with the sound of laughter. Victoria hesitated, then approached slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly, "but I came to help." Amara studied her for a long moment. "Then start by listening," she replied. Over the following months, Victoria began volunteering, quietly, without attention or cameras. At first, the others avoided her, wary of the woman who'd once gone viral for cruelty. But little by little, she earned trust. She served meals. She organized fundraisers. She listened to stories she'd never heard before, stories of strength, struggle, survival. And through it all, Amara never humiliated her. She guided her, not with words, but through example. Victoria began to understand that true power wasn't wealth or status or beauty. It was empathy, something she had never been taught but was finally learning to feel. Just as things seemed to settle, the media caught wind of her transformation. Headlines once again filled the internet, this time showing her handing out food, standing beside Amara at charity events. Some called it redemption. Others said it was just another PR stunt. But Victoria didn't care anymore. For the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She was just trying to be right with herself. Still, the story wasn't over, because what she didn't know was that Amara had been keeping a secret. one that would change everything she thought she knew about her own marriage. The afternoon sun poured softly through the tall glass windows of the community center. The place buzzed with quiet energy. Volunteers sorting boxes, children laughing, Amara discussing schedules with staff. In a corner, Victoria folded donated clothes, her hands steady, her heart calmer than it had been in years. She had changed. It wasn't instant nor easy. The journey from pride to humility had stripped her of everything she once clung to: status, image, validation. Yet, in that loss, she found something purer: peace. But peace has a way of revealing buried truths. That evening, Amara approached her. Her face was composed, but her eyes carried something new. Weight, hesitation, a story waiting to unfold. She asked Victoria to step outside, where the hum of traffic mixed with the fading orange glow of the setting sun. There, beneath the wide sky, Amara finally spoke. She told her the truth that Richard had never found the courage to say himself. Before the charity dinner, before the viral humiliation, before everything fell apart, Richard had been secretly funding Amara's foundation, not as a distant donor, but as a partner, and a friend far deeper than Victoria ever imagined. He believed in Amara's vision, her fire, her strength, but somewhere between admiration and empathy, his loyalty to Victoria had blurred. Their connection wasn't physical, but emotional, undeniable, and real. Victoria's breath caught. The air around her thickened. Each word from Amara felt like a shard of glass piercing through the fragile shell of her newfound humility. For a moment, the old anger tried to return, that bitter, defensive voice whispering, "See, you were right to hate her." But then she saw Amara's face. There was no triumph there, no vengeance, just sadness, the kind that comes from compassion too deep to fake. Amara told her she hadn't come to destroy anything. She had tried to tell Richard to be honest, long before that fateful night. She had stepped back, distanced herself, chosen silence, not to protect herself, but to protect Victoria, because she had seen something in her that even Victoria couldn't, the possibility of change. Victoria turned her gaze upward, eyes filling with tears she no longer tried to hide. The city lights shimmered against them, tiny reflections of every regret, every mistake, every cruel word she had once thrown like a weapon, and for the first time she didn't feel anger toward Amara. She felt gratitude that someone like her existed, someone strong enough to forgive but wise enough not to forget. The truth about Richard wasn't the punishment, it was the lesson, because deep down Victoria realized that Amara hadn't taken anything from her. She had given her something she never thought she needed: a mirror, one that showed her not who she was, but who she could be. Later that night, Victoria returned home. The mansion felt different now, less like a palace, more like an echo of everything she had built her life around. In Richard's office, a photo frame sat on the desk, one she had never noticed before. It showed Richard standing beside Amara at a community groundbreaking event, both smiling proudly. Victoria picked it up and stared at it for a long time, not with jealousy, but understanding, because she finally saw what Richard had seen all along: a woman who built people up instead of tearing them down. The realization didn't break her. It freed her. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, soft but steady, like the heartbeat of a world that had finally started to make sense. She walked to the window, exhaling slowly, and whispered a silent promise to herself. Never again would she use her voice to belittle someone. From now on, she would use it to lift others, and though the world still remembered her as the racist woman from the viral video, Victoria no longer cared about the world's judgment. Because redemption isn't about being seen as good, it's about finally choosing to be. Months passed. The scandal that once consumed headlines slowly faded into digital dust, replaced by newer stories, fresher outrage, louder noise. The world had moved on. But for Victoria Langston, silence had become her greatest teacher. She no longer lived in her marble mansion. She sold it quietly, donating a large portion of the money to community projects she once would have dismissed as beneath her. She rented a small apartment near the city's outskirts, modest, warm, and strangely peaceful. Every morning she walked to the community center, her steps steady, her purpose simple. She served coffee, sorted donations, read to children. No cameras, no speeches, no audience. Just small, unseen acts of kindness that healed her piece by piece. She had learned that humility wasn't a punishment, it was a cleansing. One cold afternoon, as Victoria swept the hallway, she noticed a stack of newspapers near the reception desk. Her eyes caught a familiar name in the headline. Empower Foundation expands nationwide. Founder Amara Hill credits unity over ego for success. Below the headline was a photo. Amara standing before a crowd, smiling, surrounded by women and children whose lives she'd touched. Victoria smiled faintly. No bitterness, no envy. Just pride for someone she once despised, but now deeply admired. She tore the headline carefully and pinned it to the bulletin board near the entrance, right next to a handwritten note that read, "Change doesn't start with the world seeing you differently. It starts with you seeing the world differently." Weeks later, Amara visited the center unannounced. The volunteers greeted her warmly, their admiration evident. When Victoria saw her, she paused, unsure whether to speak or step back. But Amara crossed the room first, her expression soft and genuine. There were no speeches, no apologies, just two women standing side by side, surrounded by the laughter of children. They both now helped. For the first time, there was no imbalance between them, no superiority, no resentment, just understanding. In that silence, a new kind of respect bloomed, one that didn't need words. Later that evening, Victoria found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a letter from Richard, handwritten, neat and brief. He had left for Europe months ago, choosing solitude over confrontation. The letter was both closure and confession. I failed both of you in different ways. I let privilege blind me until it nearly cost me my humanity. You, Victoria, have done what few ever do. You faced yourself. I see it now, and I'm proud of who you're becoming. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she folded the letter. For the first time, she didn't feel loss. She felt release, because love built on ego had died, but love born from truth had taken root. Love for life, for purpose, for people she once overlooked. A year later, Victoria stood on the same restaurant terrace where it all began, the chandeliers glittering, the air rich with laughter. This time, she wasn't a guest. She was part of the organizing team, setting up tables for the Empower Foundation's annual gala. The dress she wore wasn't designer. It was simple, elegant, meaningful. The woman who once tore a gown in rage now carried a clipboard, calm and content. As the doors opened and guests poured in, a young volunteer accidentally spilled water on her sleeve. The girl froze, stammering an apology. Victoria smiled, touched her shoulder gently, and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen. Take a deep breath." And just like that, the cycle broke. Prejudice isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's whispered through assumptions disguised as class, culture, or control. But when it's confronted, not with anger, but with grace, it loses its power. Victoria learned that true strength isn't in being superior, but in recognizing the humanity in others. And Amara proved that dignity doesn't need revenge to win, only truth. Because in the end, justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, found in changed hearts, not ruined lives.